So here's an interesting question. Did Penn State and James Franklin actually mislead people about the opt-outs and the Peach Bowl?
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Penn State fans? That is right. You are Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, bringing you all things Penn State Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. It's a privilege to welcome him back as a special guest, Cory Giger, columnist for DK Pittsburgh Sports. Infamously known for the just throw it deep back and forth with James Franklin. But I want people to remember him for the other commentary and the other discussions that we have about the Penn State football and the Nittany Lions. Cory, thanks so much for the time once again.
Hey, Zach, appreciate it. Good intro there. I did kind of become infamous for all that, but I was right.
Yeah, they certainly needed it when we look back on the season. So we're gonna talk about a lot of things here because you had an interesting column, an interesting article on DK Pittsburgh Sports, which I encourage people to go read, and it's about Penn State and James Franklin misleading the fan base, college football spectators about what the Peach Bowl ultimately was going to be, as eventually it totaled to 8 opt-outs. Now I know some of them played in the game, but they in the second half, 8 players that were going to go on to the NFL draft were out of this game in total. And then we'll talk about Julian Fleming, Dante Cephas, and then just how 2024 looks, because Penn State certainly needs to make some moves if they want to be successful. So let's start with that article of yours, specifically how Penn State and James Franklin, I mean, in your mind, when you approach this question, what was your impression? What were you thinking? Did Penn State and James Franklin actually mislead college football spectators and Penn State fans about who was going to be playing in the Peach Bowl against Ole Miss?
Well, I will say, yes, I do think that they misled fans, but it's not just completely cut and dry. I mean, there's a lot of gray area here. I never thought Olu Fashanu was going to play. Never. It would have been ridiculous for Olu to play in that game. But he did not come out and say he wasn't going to play. Now, Chop did. Kalen King, we didn't hear from at all. And Johnny Dixon, we never heard from.
Yep.
But here's where it gets interesting. And I just want to say this first and foremost, Zach. I'm perfectly fine with the opt-outs. I am. I think that
me too.
If you're heading to the pros and you've got millions of dollars at stake maybe, and you've got to protect your health, I have come full circle with that. I'm perfectly fine with it. But here's what happened. James Franklin kept talking about, we're a program, we don't see a reason for any player to opt out. Okay, that's the quote. That's the quote there. Because even though I can sit here and say it would have been foolish for Olu Fashanu to play in that game, if he turns an ankle or breaks a leg, that could be $30 million.
Look what happened to Abdul Carter. Look what happened to Abdul Carter. It could have easily been Curtis Jacobs. Could have easily been Olu Fashanu. I'm not here to wish injuries upon anybody. I thought Abdul Carter was the glue holding it all together. But Abdul Carter's lucky in the fact that he has to come back next season. He can't enter the draft. But all those other players could have been in that same exact situation.
And a lot of them did play some of the game. But again, here's the component. A lot of this really comes down to Kalen King, because we knew Chop wasn't going to play. If you knew about the program, you should have realized Olu wasn't going to play. And then we find out a few days before the game, Johnny Dixon wasn't even with the team. So are we having this whole misled discussion if Kalen King plays? You know, I'm at the stadium, and at 10 o'clock, they put out the personnel report, and Kalen's out, Olu's out. And at that point, that's when, if you knew how this Penn State football team operated and you knew what they were going to play against Ole Miss, you had to know Penn State was in trouble. I mean, a lot of trouble. I'd already made a prediction that Penn State was going to win 27-23. I immediately hated that prediction. I immediately knew Penn State was probably going to lose. But the key question that we're getting at here is, did James Franklin and Penn State mislead the fans? Well, that's not really for me to decide. That's for fans to decide, because perception is reality. So James can probably say he didn't mislead anybody. And Olu can say he didn't mislead anybody. He didn't say that he was going to play in the game, nor did he say that he wasn't going to play in the game. He said he would, quote, be with his teammates at the Peach Bowl
One last time.
Right. But that doesn't mean he's playing. But the fans felt misled here. And let me just mention this at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Fans are asked to foot the bill for everything now. They've got to pay for everything. The reason Penn State has 107,000 fan base is because those fans are willing to fork over $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 for season tickets. Then they're willing to fork over $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 to go to bowl games. Then you're going to hit them up for thousands of dollars at NIL. Then you're going to hit them up for maybe thousands of dollars in donations to help renovate your $700 million stadium. At what point, if you're just going to ask the fans for everything they can possibly give, and then your head coach is going to be talking about there's really no reason for anybody to opt out, but then 4 of your star players do opt out, hey, man, the reality of the situation is fans who are extremely committed to the Penn State football program, even if it's a bowl game, even if it's a quote-unquote exhibition, they still wanted to see Penn State win. And believe me, I know I've heard from many and seen from many that they felt misled. And so whether I think they were misled or not, or whether James Franklin meant to mislead anybody, the reality is there are fans out there who feel misled.
And rightfully so. I mean, I felt misled because of where I was making my prediction. My prediction was coming from the fact that you were going to have Adisa Isaac, you were going to have Kalen King, Johnny Dixon, because the matchup was solely focused on Penn State's run defense did a good enough job in terms of yards per carry against Quinshon Judkins in that running game. But the difference was having Zion Tracy, Cam Miller trying to cover a Trey Harris or a Dayton Wade. And those matchups favored Ole Miss extremely. And then you factor in the pass rush where Penn State has had the blitz-happy defenses that get pressure. Okay, that was working in the first half with a healthy Abdul Carter and Adisa Isaac, but then you bench Adisa Isaac, you bench Curtis Jacobs. Abdul Carter has to come out of the game because an Ole Miss offensive lineman gets tangled up with him. And then here you are, and then you don't have that back end of the defense to be able to counter the passing game. I like your idea of, or I guess this is something that should be posed, that James Franklin and any football teams in college football, just with the way, it's not Penn State's fault that college football is like this now in bowl season. It's kind of a consequence of the way that college football is turned. So Penn State is not the culprit. They're playing the game, hate the game, not the player in this case.
Yeah,
so
sure.
the NCAA, and what I'm getting at is, should the NCAA require Penn State to be transparent? I don't get why Penn State wasn't transparent, because it's not embarrassing to have 8 players end up going pro and not playing in this game.
James didn't want to tip his hat. They don't release a depth chart. They don't talk about injuries. I think there was a lot of gamesmanship here. And so lost in the whole thing is, okay, so fine. You want to play the gamesmanship factor with Olu Fashanu and Kalen King? Then you want to go out and ask your hundreds of thousands of fans to give thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars
to Atlanta?
Right. And so at what point are you really not just misleading your fans, but you're putting your fans in a very difficult situation because they want to root for you. They want to see the best possible. Right. Now, so what we're kind of getting at here is, should there be a deadline? I think there should be a deadline, December 15th, 17th,
I think there
18th.
will be. I think there will be, because of all the money that's now involved with the gambling aspect of it too. The NFL makes you have an injury report. The fact that James Franklin and whoever else, Jim Harbaugh, they all hide their depth charts, like you said, the injury report leading up to 3, and then it's mandated 2-3 hours before kickoff. That is going to change, where you're going to have the same regulations as the NFL. If somebody's missing from practice Monday and Tuesday, they are showing up on the injury report as questionable, doubtful, whatever.
Well, here, let me throw out the one thing that really makes this a very unique situation for Penn State.
Still more to come on this Locked On Nittany Lions, including what Penn State still needs to fix, even though they got Julian Fleming out of the transfer portal, on the other side of this break. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is super easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. Find bets in the new Explore tab. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays already made, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Next year, college football changes. Next year, we've got the 12-team playoff. So in a lot of ways, while I think that we can try to find solutions to the problems that just happened, the solutions will be there automatically next year. If you're in the playoff, we think, again, at some point there will be guys opting out of playoffs and down at some point, 10, 11, 12 seed, you're playing Georgia in the first round, you're not going to win. Might somebody opt out? Maybe. Okay. Yeah. But I think if you're Penn State and you get in the playoff, damn well the expectation had better be that 100% of the guys are going to go 100% of the time that they can. If you're not in the playoff, I don't think any Penn State fan should ever think that players are going to play in these bowl games. If you're not in the playoff, bowl games will be completely and totally meaningless. And
unless you're a Group 5 team.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about specifically
for Penn State. For Penn State.
If you're look, I've been to the Citrus Bowl, I've been to the Outback Bowl. If Penn State winds up in the Citrus Bowl and the Outback Bowl, I could see 30 guys opting out. Why would anybody play in that game if you're not in a playoff? You're ready to move on. Okay. Last year the Rose Bowl, only Joey Porter Jr. opted out. That's the Rose Bowl, man. That's the Rose Bowl. You dream of playing the Rose Bowl. This was the Peach Bowl, and while they only had 4 opt-outs, only 4 in terms of not playing in the game to start. Those happen to be 4 of your best players, and you're not going to win the game without those 4. But I guess my bottom line with this is we can try to come up with rules and solutions to fix it. It's going to fix itself next year because no Penn State fan, I'm not going to listen to James Franklin. I'm not going to put any weight into what James Franklin says ever again about where, we don't have any reason for players to opt out, but we've got a program and a culture. No, forget it. You've lost credibility there. That's gone. If you're not in the playoff going forward, I'm never going to assume that hardly anybody is going to play if they've got a decision.
Can this be fixed, Cory? Can Penn State? I feel like this is an NCAA issue, not specific. I mean, look what happened to Ohio State. All of them, unless you were in the semifinal, you had USC. Even though they won, you had a significant amount of opt-outs. Can this be fixed if it's not a 12-team playoff?
It cannot, because you cannot force players to play a game. You can't. You can say, well, you can take away their NIL money. Well, they'll figure out a way around that. The bottom line is, if you get hurt in a bowl game and it costs you $10 million, you're never getting that money back. And the Jake Butt injuries of the world, those are going to scare people more than losing their NIL. So no, even in the NFL, Zach, think about this. You can't force a guy to play. If there's some guy for the 49ers and he just doesn't want to play 1 week, well, fine. He can sit and he won't get his paycheck and they can cut him. But what if he's somebody that's so important that they feel like they need? You cannot force athletes to play, and especially a game like football where it's so vicious. So look, can it be fixed? No, it can't be fixed. So don't mislead your fans with the facade of we've got a great relationship and open communication with all these players and there's no reason for anybody to opt out. And then you have what happened to Penn State, because that's going to infuriate a lot of people.
I agree. Be transparent, be honest, right? That's what we're looking, because James Franklin preaches transparency. It's just it's the carefully crafted letters saying that I'm going to be with the team, or James Franklin saying we're excited to have Kalen King for one more game. Yeah,
I like what you said.
Have him on the sideline.
Carefully crafted letters. It's like they've got. Let's get the lawyers to look over this to make sure we're not giving anything away.
Yeah, Olu Fashion, I'm excited to travel with my team one more time. James Franklin saying we have Kalen King for one more game on the sideline, not dressed to play a football game. So that's they had a lot of players move on, and that's good. That's Penn State has a track record of now continuing to produce NFL talent. So that's not the question. But for these kinds of games, I say be honest. You had a lot of talented players that weren't going to risk it in the Peach Bowl.
And you can say it's just a bowl game. Fans should go to bowl games for the trip and for the fest. And look, I get that. Say you've got to book your travel by December 10th or 12th, and there's a deadline of December 16th or 18th for guys to opt in. You still got to book your travel before you know if guys are going to play. But there has been a buildup here that James has talked about this going back to last year with the Rose Bowl, and then from as soon as Bowl Media Day hit, or early on when they were selected this year, he said they've got a situation where they shouldn't have opt-outs, blah, blah. So fans kind of start to believe that. Should they have believed it? Should they have expected Olu Fashion to play? No, absolutely not. Should they have expected Kalen King to play? No. But if you're not going to come flat out and say they're not playing, and you're going to hide behind these carefully crafted statements of we've got a plan in place, that's how you turn a fan base against you. And look, I mean, I think James Franklin's a good coach. I think he's doing a good job. There was a Twitter discussion this week about give a grade to James Franklin's tenure. I gave him a B+. I think he's done a really good job. Some people want to give him a B- or a C+. I think that's kind of crazy. He's done a good job, but the fan base, there's a lot of people in the fan base that get frustrated with James Franklin for just this kind of reason, feeling misled about the opt-outs, and then you go lose a big game and you end your season on a dud.
Let's pivot in this podcast and look towards now the future, as Dante Cephas, even though he wasn't technically an opt-out, he didn't play in the game, and now he's in the transfer portal. Julian Fleming is transferring into Penn State, finally commits after all the writing was on the wall. And here's where these two teams are, and here's where Penn State is now moving forward. But Cory, how would you start to make sense of the wide receiver moves? Because personally, I did not see Dante Cephas going back into the transfer portal. I knew that there were going to be it seemed like there were going to be radical changes. I called for radical changes because this could not carry over into 2024 when you have the concerns about work ethic, effort, guys aren't studying the playbook enough, in the film room enough, all these things. So it's not a matter of talent, it's a matter of effort. And that if you want to be competitive in this new Big Ten, that had to be put to a stop. And now you check off those boxes. Julian Fleming, for what he is as a pass catcher, that's fine. We can debate that all day. But he's a hard worker. He's a veteran. He's a leader. And Dante Cephas, who was none of those things, is in the transfer portal and probably not going to come back to Penn State.
Yeah, I think that's really the key with Julian Fleming from everything I've ascertained. I mean, he's caught 79 passes in 4 years at Ohio State. He's not had a great career, less than 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns. Okay, but the work ethic, he's been in a wide receiver room that's producing first-round picks left and right. He knows how to play the game the right way. I don't think that these Penn State receivers know how to play the game the right way. In terms of, look at Dante Cephas. Do we know for sure what happened there? No, but I got to think it's work ethic. I got to think he just wasn't ready, wasn't putting in on time. I wonder about Keandre Lambert-Smith. He has not entered the transfer portal. I kind of thought maybe he would or turn pro or something. We'll see about that.
Still a little bit more time, I think. 5 days, or I guess it's almost at that time, depending on when people are watching, listening to this. The deadline is still there for him to make a decision last second.
And you hope Harrison Wallace can come back and be better. I still don't think they've got a number one Big Ten wide receiver on this team. Maybe having Julian Fleming come in and showing the younger guys how to work harder can help. But we still don't know what happened with Taylor Stubblefield. How much of this can be blamed on Marcus Hagans versus how much of it did he just inherit? And look, the whole thing is just a mess. The whole thing is just a disaster. I've obviously been on this for months now, after what happened with Dave and I during the press conference. but their wide receiver situation is a disaster. I cannot possibly fathom how they allowed it to get this bad in the year. You've got your 5-star quarterback starting. You've got maybe your best offensive line in years and years. You've got the best defense that you've had in 25 years. And yet one position killed the program. One position killed the Penn State football program's ultimate hopes this year.
Still more to come on this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, including what's a realistic outlook for Penn State football in 2024. Today's episode is also brought to you by Gametime. Buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all of your sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. The Gametime app experience is great. I've used Gametime personally. What I love is the flash deals on last-minute tickets. So if you're deciding to go to an event last second, you get deals on top of those tickets. It's easy to find and buy tickets to every kind of event in your area. It's all sorted out for you, and you get image views of the seats. So there's no second guessing and wondering, is this actually how the event is going to look? You have accurate image views of the seats in the Gametime app. Lowest price guaranteed, plus event cancellation protection. Gametime is the place to get those last-second deals on all of it. Football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. So snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Yeah, that's very true, because I always go back to the pass catchers and the way that, yes, Mike Yurcich with James Franklin, but the offense, when you scheme your 5-star quarterback to be a game manager, and I'm not saying in practice they're like, don't trust your receivers, don't trust your receivers, don't trust your receivers, but I know they were saying, don't make the big mistake where we can't come back from it. That's what it boiled down to. So Penn State they boxed themselves into, we won't turn the ball over. We'll rely on Singleton and Allen to grind the defense out. And then we'll use our defense to smother the opponent. And that can win you 10 games against the rest of the Big Ten, but not Michigan and not Ohio State. I thought it could beat Ohio State. Maybe you play that game 10 more times, and it does about 50-50 of the time. You still play, you can only play the one game, though. This is an NBA basketball series in the playoffs. You don't do that. But my point being is, yes, so Penn State gets that turnover against Ohio State, yada, yada, yada. Maybe they're 11-1, but that formula was never going to beat Michigan. And those wide receivers never made a dent. Will Johnson shut down Keandre Lambert-Smith. Denzel Burke shut down Keandre Lambert-Smith and Trey Wallace, whoever was out there in those games. And that was the thing. The wide receivers, the passing game, never even made it respectable. They were completely taken out of the game. Your 5-star quarterback essentially became running back number 3 against Michigan. And how could that have happened? You have to, so Mike Yurcich, yes, wide receivers as well, because they're just not getting open. And why would Drew Allar throw it to them? And what the saying was, do not turn it over, do not make the big mistake. Why would Drew Allar do that when he's coached to do that, but also the wide receivers aren't giving him any relief?
So the ultimate question with all of that is Drew Allar any good? Do we have any idea if Drew Allar's any good at all? Because I'll tell you what, you see the throws Jackson Dart was attempting in the Peach Bowl? Penn State didn't even try those throws, man. I mean, it was night and day what we saw from Penn State's off. Now, look, they had the number 1 defense in the country, and they won 10 games, and Drew Allar threw 1 interception in the regular season. The program will point to all of those things, and those are good things. But do you get any sense that Drew Allar could make the throws that Jackson Dart? Not only could he make the throws, would he even attempt the throws into coverage, into tight spots that Ole Miss did? See, Ole Miss plays in a conference and a division that's the only division that's tougher than the Big Ten East, where they know they've got to be able to get to 40 or 50 points because they're probably not going to be able to shut these other teams down. So their program is built on trying to get to 40 points. Penn State's program is built on defense and shutting you down from, keeping you 10, 13, 17 points. So that made this a very difficult matchup. But that's what Penn State's going to face in a playoff scenario down the road. If you're just going to build your program to compete with teams in the Big Ten, you'd better expect to have a lot of issues when you play these teams like an Ole Miss or, obviously an Alabama or Georgia or maybe even, some of these other programs that are willing to throw the ball. They're willing to take chances. Zach, let me ask you this. Would you rather have had Drew Allar had 2 interceptions throwing safe passes all the time or 10 interceptions really doing what Jackson Dart was trying to do? Which would you rather have?
Well, and that's just it. I think back to Andrew Luck when he was in the NFL and he was leading the league in interceptions. And you look at some of Josh Allen leads the league in interceptions or is up there. And yeah, you can criticize them, but he is also making the most plays. There's also the most explosiveness. So yes, it goes hand in hand. So Penn State not turning the ball over, that's great, but they're also not moving it up and down the field at will. Whereas the Bills, and I know I'm comparing this to pro players, but it's still the same thing. The Bills are not afraid. They can come back from 2-3 touchdowns down. Penn State was doomed the second Ole Miss went up by 10 points.
Yeah, and that's an issue that you really wonder what it's going to look like next year because Manny's gone. King and Dixon are gone. Chop's gone. Curtis Jacobs is gone. I think the defense is going to be maybe somewhat pedestrian compared to what we've seen from Penn State defenses. So will the philosophy change? Will it now be Andy Kotelnicki try to go out and score 35, 40 points because we think our defense might give up 25 or 30 points per game? So what's the philosophy going to be? And might we see a dip? Look, I don't know if Drew Allar's any good or not. I tend to say no because he hasn't shown me anything. He hasn't shown me anything. He really hasn't. The 2 interceptions this year, I'd rather him thrown 10, but actually attempted really difficult passes and seen the whole field. He doesn't see the whole field. He doesn't seem to trust his receivers. So can all of that be fixed next year? Will he trust Julian Fleming? Will he trust Harrison Wallace? And if KLS is back, I don't know. Will they let? I think he's probably been told 10,000 times, don't turn the ball over. Maybe you start telling him, let's be more aggressive. If you turn it all over every now and then, it'll be okay, but we've got to make some more plays.
So, I mean, you segued perfectly into it. 2024, the outlook, and I guess I was going to go back to what the wide receivers, what can they do, what will they do? Because when I look at it, so as we are in this final segment, Cory, the wide receivers are better because Julian Fleming fixes the needs in the running game. I think the running game will be better and be able to take some pressure off of that passing game. So Julian Fleming was a must because he's one of the best blocking wide receivers probably in college football right now. And you're going to get a hard worker that's not going to be selfish and saying, well, I'm not getting enough. I'm not getting 10 catches a game for 100 yards. So therefore, I'm not going to go pancake somebody out in front of the sideline. That's not it at all. You're getting a selfless player here. But I can't help but think with an offensive line that has been able to stack class after class after class with Phil Troutwine, you still have 2 future NFL draft picks where they're selected. That's fine. Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton are future NFL players, and they're going to be good ones. Where they're selected, different conversation. So you have that. You have a quarterback that, Cory, you're telling me shouldn't exactly be trusted at this point. So with all that being said, I can't, and Andy Kotelnicki is a run-first guy. He's not a quarterback whisperer. He's not a wide receivers coach. And I never got to say this, Cory. It's interesting to me that James Franklin was a quarterback in college, was a former quarterbacks coach, coached with the Green Bay Packers as a wide receivers coach. And the thing that is letting Penn State down right now is not its defense, is not its ground game, it's passing attack, it's aerial attack. When at James Franklin's foundation, he is a wide receivers passing attack kind of guy. At least he's supposed to be. And then you bring in Andy Kotelnicki, and he's satisfying all these other needs that go back to ground and pound, ball control, because that's who he is. Do I think, yes, the running game will help the passing attack? Yes, you run the ball to set up the pass. Absolutely, that's what you do. But Julian Fleming is not a bona fide playmaker. Is he a better wide receiver? Do secondaries need to respect him? Yes, but I think we're going to get a better version of what we saw in 2023. How much better is the question? What do you think?
Yeah, it'll be interesting just to see what they do offensively. They ran the triple option at Kansas, and I keep joking about
Yeah.
this. Drew Allar ain't running no triple option. You know,
Yeah.
I do not think that Bo Prabula is the answer over
No,
Drew
you
Allar.
play Drew over Bo. Yeah.
Correct, but it's not completely unrealistic to think that in the Kansas version of the offense that Andy Kotelnicki ran, Bo Prabula might be the more productive guy. It's not unreasonable to think if Bo Prabula and Drew Allar were at Kansas this year. Again, they ran the triple option. This is like Oklahoma, 1986. All right, so look, they're going to change it to fit Drew's skill set more. But ultimately, I'll throw this out there. I worry about Ethan Grunkmeyer. If Andy Kotelnicki is at Penn State for a long time, and his base formations is more of this crazy running, Trace McSorley kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Is Drew Allar ever going to be successful in that? Is Ethan Grunkmeyer going to be successful in that? Or do you need to go start – again, I'm not necessarily saying play Bo Prabula.
Right.
You need to get a better version of Bo Prabula. Where are the Trace McSorleys of the world? Those are the guys that are going to be more successful in this offense as opposed to the prototypical pocket passer.
And I think that's why Andy Kotelnicki was brought in to adapt the system where everybody can benefit, Singleton, Allen. But at some point, somebody loses out, somebody misses out, and you can only do with what you have. You're only as strong as your weakest link. So I can use all these different euphemisms that you might hear James Franklin say on a week-to-week basis in the press conference, but that's just it. Penn State needs to get somebody from the transfer portal like a Dorian Singer if you want them to go 3 wide receivers. With Keandre Lambert-Smith, you know what you have with KLS. There isn't, he still has this untapped potential. You've seen him now over the course of 4 seasons as someone who came up through the program. You know what he is. You've kind of maxed out what he can do. Can he be better at the things he's good at? Yes, but I don't think he's going to overall become this entirely different wide receiver that puts the passing attack over the top and one of the best in the conference. You don't know what you have with Trey Wallace. Trey Wallace still has potential, which is why Julian Fleming and Trey Wallace are your automatic starters, and Keandre Lambert-Smith is even up for debate if he'll be even with the program. And then there's the spring practice transfer portal window. Does Penn State try to get another wide receiver there? So I agree with you that the defense is not going to be number one in yards per play, sacks per game, yards allowed, all these metrics that Manny Diaz shattered. And part of that has to do with coaching. Part of that has to do with personnel. You're losing 3 starting defensive backs. You're losing Curtis Jacobs. You're losing Chop Robinson, Adisa Isaac. Does Tony Rojas immediately become as good as Curtis Jacobs? Probably not. But you hope that Abdul Carter, Kobe King get better. But I think the problem is with Washington, Oregon, UCLA, USC, and I know you're not playing Oregon, but those 3 other schools come into the Big Ten. You still have the likes of Ohio State and Michigan, and your secondary is going to be a liability unless you make moves in the transfer portal. So, yes, the offense is going to have to pick up with where the defense lets you down, because that wasn't the case. The offense let down the defense almost every time this past season.
And as we look ahead, it is playoff or bust. For the Penn State program now, going forward, it is playoff or bust. They would play off 5 times in 7 years if it were a 12-team field. The expectation is they're going to make it next year.
Yep.
I'm actually going to pick them to not get in next year. I talked about this on my radio show today. I haven't written it yet, but my for next year is 9-3. I'm not just going to assume when you take a massive hit like they're going to on defense. And Manny Diaz, let's be realistic. Manny Diaz is the biggest loss in the program, period. You're going to take a hit there. You're going to lose a lot of offensive linemen. I'm going 9-3 and no playoff. And I kind of assumed all along they would make the playoff next year. USC is going to have a new quarterback. You don't know what you're going to get there. I don't think USC was really any good this year. Washington's going to have a new quarterback. Ohio State's going to have a new quarterback. These teams that you're playing, they're going to have some question marks themselves. But I will just say this, that with all the question marks we've got with Penn State, I'm not just going to sit here and assume they're going to go 10-2.
Cory, I appreciate the time, the honesty about your expectations for Penn State football, given the conclusion of 2023, and then just the issues that do remain ahead if they aren't solved. Now, fortunately, you have college football's version of free agency, so who knows? In 2 weeks' time, you get a former 4-star cornerback, you get a veteran out of the transfer portal, you get a Nolan Rucci just entered in. Does he make the same decision as Julian Fleming? That can all change expectations, but I appreciate your analysis and can't wait for the next time we get to have this kind of conversation.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it, Zach.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. If you aren't already, become an everydayer for the latest Penn State sports analysis. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, and keep up with Cory Giger on X, formerly known as Twitter, where he writes for DK Pittsburgh Sports. Check that out at dkpittsburghsports.com. We'll have more coverage of football, men's basketball, men's hockey, and wrestling on the way as well here on Locked On Nittany Lions.